Today's daf we're going to be learning is Avodah Zarah daf Kaf Zayin. Before we start, I'll just mention two things. I mentioned the other day that we're starting to prepare the bookmarks for Seder Kodashim, which we're going to start in September, mid-September, just before Rosh Hashanah. So anyone who's interested in sponsorship opportunities, you can write to us and let us know. It's $500 to sponsor a bookmark. Parallel, I don't remember the amount in shkalim. So if you would like to do that, there's opportunities to put on the bookmark some sort of dedication. I'm going to be not teaching for a month from live. I will be teaching. I'll have your shiur every day. But the Zoom will not happen from July 25th till around August 25th. Probably I'll start again August 25th. If something changes, I'll let you know toward the end of August. That's the plan. So the shiurim will be up a few hours earlier than usual, and everyone can learn at their own pace, but there will not be Zoom for that month. And I mentioned at some point, but in case you missed that shiur, so any dedications that come in will just go into the written text, but not necessarily be announced. There's still a few more shiurim I haven't prepared yet, so if you have a dedication toward the end of that time and you want to send them in, you can get them in as quickly as you can. Okay, let's start our daf with the end of daf Kafav. I want to just go back to review what we were in the middle of, because we're kind of in the middle of a sugya. We saw this Breita, which again had this debate between Rabbi Meir and the rabbis about the Ovdei Kochavim and the concern, right? So we said, first of all, a Jew can give a brit mila to an Ovdei Kochavim if they're converting them, but not if they're healing them, and that had to do with a totally different issue. That had to do with the whole issue of we don't take them out of a bore, right? If they fall into a bore, we don't help them, right? That's part of, again, if you're assuming these are idol worshippers and they're not engaged in behaviors that we want to be involved in, so it's okay to leave them and not to help them. Again, hard to swallow, but that's what it is. Then we get to the Ovei Kochavim and the whole concern, and that's going to continue to be a concern throughout our sugyot, that perhaps this Ovei Kochavim might want to kill you, and therefore you should avoid having them do a brit milah for you. So Ovei Kochavim lo yamu Yisrael, because they're chashudim al shvichut damim. That's Rabbi Meir. The rabbis say as long as there's somebody there, we're not worried, and then we had back and forth why Rabbi Meir is still worried. Okay, then we started questioning these opinions, because there's a different source that starts to say, well, let's say there's no Jewish doctor. Doctor here really means doctor / mohel. Right, nowadays also we have doctors who are mohalim. So there's no Jew. So what are you going to do? What's better, Cuti or Ovei Kochavim? So we have a machloket Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Meir says better go with the Ovei Kochavim, and Rabbi Yehuda says better go with the Cuti. Now, if Rabbi Meir says they might kill you, then why is he going with the Ovei Kochavim? That doesn't seem to match. To which the Gemara says flip their shitot, which sounds good and fine, except there's another problem with that, which is Rabbi Yehuda, and a different source says that you can't have a brit milah by an Ovei Kochavim. It's actually not even considered a brit milah, because the only people who can circumcise you for the sake of circumcision, for the mitzvah of circumcision, is Atat Briti Tishmor, Avram is told. You have to keep my covenant and do a brit milah, and therefore only those who are commanded to do brit milah can perform a brit milah. So we now have this problem, because neither Rabbi Yehuda nor Rabbi Meir matches. So what are we going to do? So they say, and this is where we ended yesterday, fine, go back to the original. Rabbi Meir really said Ovei Kochavim can do it. Now, didn't we say Ovei Kochavim can't do it? Don't worry about that. That's a rofei mumche. Okay, now, then we get into a whole other section of heterim, saying, oh, well, if they're a doctor, and a professional doctor or a specialist, then, right, the question is, how far you go to say what a mumche is. A mumche is usually an expert. I think you really mean they're a doctor. They have a standard they have to keep to, right? They have a reputation. If they were to kill someone while they were doing the brit milah, they would lose their good name. So they wouldn't ruin that just to kill the Jew. In other words, it's balancing. Yes, Rabbi Meir says we should be concerned, and as we said before, it's precautionary. However, if there's something weighing on the other side, then it's okay. And that's the resolution to the contradiction. The problem is, and then we quoted, okay, I'll just read it, it's the beginning of our daf, Dechiyata Rav Dimi, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Rav Dimi, when he came from Israel to Babylonia, he said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, this exact thing, okay? If the person's a specialist, it's permitted. However, we still have a problem, because what's the problem? So we now did, to resolve the contradiction, we flipped who says what. And then we said, no, that doesn't work. Let's stick with the original because the flip didn't work because then Rabbi Yehuda didn't match Rabbi Yehuda. Right? Originally, Rabbi Meir didn't match Rabbi Meir. Then Rabbi Yehuda didn't match Rabbi Yehuda. So we flipped. We flipped it, but that didn't work with Rabbi Yehuda. We flipped it back. Rabbi Meir, two different situations. Akum, who's a Rofei Mumche. Akum, who's not a Rofei Mumche. But now we got to go to the other side. So that means that what does Rabbi Yehuda hold? Go with the Cuti and not the Akum. Savar Rabbi Yehuda Cuti Shapir Dami, but that contradicts a different source, where Rabbi Yehuda says Cuti doesn't work. V'hatanya Yisrael malata Cuti, v'Cuti lo yimo Yisrael. Now Cutim are, so to speak, Jews. However, they don't exactly keep all the mitzvot, and we're going to see that Rabbi Yehuda viewed them as idol worshippers. Okay, that they worshipped their own gods on Har Grizim. That's where their temple was. Like there were certain things that they disagree about. They disagree where's Hamakom Yivchar. They pray in Har Grizim, not in Jerusalem. Now, Yisrael can give a brit mila to a Cuti because there's no issue there, what we talked about before, with the Jew not helping because Cuti is considered Jewish. But the Cuti lo yimo Yisrael. Why is that? Mipnei shemal l'shem Har Grizim. He gives a brit milah for the sake of their God that they worship at Har Grizim. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. And yes, they still do. You can go to Har Grizim and see the Kilala of the Shomronim. They live there. So now, the Cuti is going to do a brit milah for the wrong God, basically. Okay, they're going to do it. Now, this is a halacha we've learned about before of lishma, which is certain things have to be done lishma, l'shem the mitzvah, right? Circumcision, you could say it doesn't matter what purpose anyone's circumcising you, as long as you're circumcised. That's what's important. But Rabbi Yehuda says no. You have to be circumcised for the right purpose. And if someone's circumcising you for the sake of their own, some other gods, that's not going to work. Okay? That's not a valid brit milah. So now we have a problem, because if Rabbi Yehuda says that a Cuti can't give a brit milah because they're going to do it l'shem Har Grizim, and that's a disqualified circumcision, then how could he say if there's no doctor, go to a Cuti? So now we're really stuck, because we can't say switch the cited. That didn't work with Rabbi Yehuda either, because Rabbi Yehuda there says a Gentile can't, because the Gentile isn't commanded. Now the Cuti might be commanded because they're Jewish, but they're Jews who also worship idols, and therefore we're worried they're going to do it l'shem Avodah Zarah. And that's a problem as a Cuti. So now Rabbi Yehuda, there's no way to really explain this. Now, since we're already in this Breita, we're going to finish the Breita, and then we'll come back to our question and bring an answer. Amar lo Rabbi Yossi says, where do we see any source that brit milah needs to be l'shem God? Okay, again, as I said before, right? Maybe you just need to be circumcised. It's not right. The get, it's a whole process. You have to write it. You have to give it. The process is important. Maybe circumcision. It says who says the process is important and for what purpose it's done. In the end, you just need to be circumcised. So Ela mal v'holech ad shetetzei nishmato. He says Cuti wants to give a brit milah to a Jew. He can be a moel. He can do brit milahs every day of his life until he dies. Kind of says it in this funny, exaggerated way. Ad shetetzei nishmato, right? And he can just continually do brit milahs all of his life until he dies. No problem. But Rabbi Yossi is not important to us because we weren't talking about Rabbi Yossi. So we're stuck with Rabbi Yehuda. So therefore, it can't possibly be that Rabbi Yehuda says the Cuti. So if Rabbi Yehuda doesn't say the Cuti, then we have to put him back the original way, and then therefore they say, L'olam ipo kedab china meikara. Flip the cited and say, really, Rabbi Meir says the Cuti. Rabbi Yehuda says the Akum. Now, what was the problem? The Gemara is going to remind us. Udikakasha de Rabbi Yehuda de Rabbi Yehuda. Well, okay, they don't exactly, right? They don't quote why, but if you remember that version, Rabbi Yehuda contradicted himself because he said, Atai priti tishmor, and Rovei Kochavim is no good. So how are you going to explain that? Here's our easy answer. Hahi to Rabbi Yehuda Hanasihi. The Rabbi Yehuda that we always talk about in the Mishnah and the Breitot is Rabbi Yehuda, the son of Rabbi Eli. Okay? The Rabbi Yehuda that's mentioned that disqualifies Avodah Zarah, the Gemara is now going to suggest is Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. It's a different Rabbi Yehuda, which is funny because, right, every time you see Rabbi Yehuda, it's always Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Eli. And anytime it says Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, it either says Rabbi, which is usually, or it says Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. So it's a little bit strange, but you can imagine if things were passed on orally, sometimes, right? It's not even a Mishnah, by the way. It's a brit. If someone passed down orally, they cut off the Hanasi part, and it's just not him. And that's how we resolve the contradiction. Now, it's not just that they're pulling this out of nowhere, because it says here, Detanya, they're now going to quote a brit where this opinion appears in the name of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. And that actually means it's pretty good support. Detanya, as it says in a brit, Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi omil, minayin lemila b'ovei kochavim she'ipsula, tamar lomar, b'atad briti tishmor. So there you have it. It's in the name of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, and therefore we can assume that when we brought it before as a difficulty on Rabbi Yehuda, it wasn't really a difficulty on him because it wasn't really him who said it, and we resolved the contradiction. So we're back to saying this brit that we brought with Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda, is flipped. It's not Rabbi Meir who says the akum, and you don't have to say it's a rofe mumche. No, Rabbi Meir actually said go with the Cuti, and Rabbi Yehuda said go with the ovei kochavim. Now you have a question, which is what? What did Rabbi Yehuda just say? You need lishma. Now, an akum doesn't do it lishma. So, obviously this question is asked by the commentaries. The Gemara doesn't ask this question. But there seems to be a difference, and it's not exactly lishma like we normally learn lishma. Lishma, like in a get, it has to be done with the intent for this woman, all that. Okay, if it's not done lishma with the right intent, proper intent, it's not good. This really means you can't do it l'shem something else. And the people who are that we're going to worry, you're going to do it l'shem, their idols are people who circumcise for the sake of their idols. And that's only the kutim. The Ovdei Kochavim don't do circumcision for their gods. So they wouldn't, if they would circumcise a Jew, they wouldn't do it for in the name of their gods. They would do it because they know the Jew's trying to circumcise for their own God. So it wouldn't be not lishma. Okay? Now, hard to say it's actually lishma because generally Gentiles wouldn't be doing something l'shem God, and would that be considered l'shem God? I don't think. But it obviously, the requirement of lishma here is a little bit different. That's what you would have to say, otherwise it really makes no sense. It needs lishma. It shouldn't be done by a Cuti or a Gentile. And again, remember, the only reason we're allowing this right here is because of what? Because we have no choice. There's no Jew to do it, so we're going to have someone else do it. Okay, now we're going to go into it. This machloket, we're not a machloket, but a difference of opinion about why Rabbi Yehuda disqualifies the brit mila of Gentiles, okay? Or I guess it's Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda. They're going back to this source that quoted it as Rabbi Yehuda, which is really Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. What's the reason? Dechtiv lahashem himol. My mistake. We're going to, how do we know we need it lishma? Okay? Now we're going to see the machloket. What's the basis of the machloket of Rabbi Yehuda, the real Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Eli, and Rabbi Yossi for doing brit mila lishma. So I'm Rav Chisda, my time at Rabbi Yehuda. Dechtiv lahashem himol. Okay, we're going to have this pasuk. We'll read it, and you'll see right away what the issue is. V'chi yagorit chager. We're now in Shemot Yubet, which is the commandment. Chodesh hazeh lachem. This is the month for you, and you have to bring a korban pesach. And it says, so if there's a ger with you, a convert, v'aseh pesach l'Hashem, and he wants to do the pesach to God, himol lo kol zachal. Okay, you have to make sure to do a brit milah first. Okay, all the males have to have a brit milah. Now, if you look at this pasuk, what Rabbi Yehuda did is he said, it says lahashem himol, do the brit milah for God. That means for the sake of God, lishma. But what did he do? I'm going to read the pasuk again, and you'll see right away. Ki yagorit chagil v'asa pesach laHashem, comma himol lo kol zachal. Okay, there's a big comma in between. LaHashem doesn't go with himol. It doesn't read LaHashem himol. It's pesach to God, then do a brit milah, detached from LaHashem. But Rabbi Yehuda says, look, they're juxtaposed, and this is what you do in the world of drasha. Two words that are next to each other, even if there's a comma in between them, you could read them as one continuum, and therefore, LaHashem himol, it has to be done lishma. Rabbi Yossi, himol yimol. He says, no, the commandment to Avraham in Bereshit Yud Zayin was himol yimol, which is a double language. Often when we say double language, it means in any way you want to do it. Meaning it doesn't matter who does it as long as you're circumcised. V'idach. Now, we're going to do the ping pong. What is Rabbi Yossi going to do with LaHashem himol? Aktiv LaHashem himol. To which he answers the obvious answer that you would have answered. Ha'u b'pesach tiv. LaHashem goes with the Pesach. It doesn't go with the word himol. What about the double language? Why don't you learn there in any case? According to Rabbi Yehuda, this is a classic answer we give, which is, don't make so much of double language. That's just the way the Torah uses. It's just the way the Torah speaks in the language of people, and people speak like that, and they don't mean anything from it. You're not supposed to darshan that. Now we're going to go back to the opinion of why brit mila by an akum is forbidden. Itmar. And we're now going to see a machloket, and it's going to break down into what we saw in the name of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi and another opinion. How do you know that an ovei kochavim can't do a brit mila? Remember, we had two opinions. One said they can if there's no one else, but one said they can't. So now we're going with those who say you can't. Daru bar papa mishmei de Rav Amar. Remember him from the Siyum, Daru bar papa, one of the brothers. Va'ata ebriti tishmor. So Daru bar papa quotes Rav as saying ata ebriti tishmor, okay, which is the one we saw before in the name of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. Rabbi Yochanan quotes a different pasuk. Himol yimol. And what does he do with himol yimol? Not like we said before, anyway, you need to be circumcised. He uses it to say the person who is commanded to do a brit milah, that's the person who can do a brit milah. And if you're not commanded, himol yimol. The mal, the one who's mal, is yimol. That's the person that can do the brit milah, that can circumcise. So now the big question is, my benayu. Where are we going to have a nafkamina, practical difference between these two opinions, whether you're going to learn from one pasuk or the other pasuk? For this section, we're going to try 3 different attempts. The first 2 are going to be rejected. We're going to say they're not necessarily practical differences between those 2 approaches, but the third one is going to be Aravi mahul v'gavnuni mahul ika benayu. Okay, if you have an Arab who's mahul or a gavnuni who's mahul, now these are all the tzedzaim, the descendants of Avraham. Now Avraham was also commanded. The gavnunim, Rashi says, are from the sons of Keturah, which is one of the wives of Avraham. So now, Aravi mahul and gavnuni mahul ika benayu, that would be a nafkamina. Manda amar himol yimol ika. They all get circumcision. So because they're circumcised, they're part of himol yimol, and they would be able to do it. Umanda amar briti tishmor leika. But they're not part of the covenant of Avraham, right? That was really for Yitzchak and his sons after, and therefore, since they're not part of the covenant, then they wouldn't be able to do it. However, Lamanda Amar Himol Yimol Ika, wait a minute. If you say Himol Yimol, they can really do a brit milah, but look, okay, if you say Himol Yimol, if you say Himol Yimol means if they're circumcised, they can do a brit milah. But, which really means anyone who's considered mal, right, circumcised, can do a brit milah for a Jew. What's the problem? Hatna. Now it's interesting they're bringing this. They're using neder, the laws of neder, and when I say a neder, which is actually different because it's really based on what human jargon is and what people mean when they say certain words. So, what they're going to use here is proof, and they're going to basically say when someone says arel, which is non-circumcised, they are referring even to non-Jews who might be circumcised. And when someone says circumcised, they really mean Jew, even if they're not circumcised. Okay, that's going to be the second nafkamina. So, okay, well, we're within the second nafkamina. We're going to see that. So let's see it inside. Vahatna, there's a Mishnah in Nedarim that says, Konam sha'ani nehenem min ha'arelim. I'm not going to benefit from anyone who's called arelim, which really means literally uncircumcised. Mutar ba'arle Yisrael, you're permitted to get benefit from a non-circumcised Jew, because that's not what you meant. Fasur b'mulei amot ha'olam, and you're forbidden even to those who are circumcised who are not part of the Jewish people. Because the word mal, even though technically it means circumcised, it doesn't really mean circumcised. It means someone who's not Jewish. And therefore, even though they're not circumcised, it's as if they're, even though they're circumcised, it's as if they're not circumcised. And therefore, even himol yimol wouldn't apply to them. Now again, I'm just pointing out what I said before, which is it's an interesting comparison because when the Torah uses the word mal, it's not necessarily the same as when a person takes a vow and uses the word mal or arel or something like that. But the Gemara is equating them and basically saying that can't be a nafkamina because they won't be able to circumcise you either which way, right? Whichever pasuk you go by. Elei kabenayu, and they're going to do really the same kind of thing with the second one. Yisrael shemetu achav machmat mila velo maluhu. There's a certain case where you don't have to do a brit milah, and that's if someone's brothers died with a brit milah. If you have a chazaka, it's part of one of those basic machlokot about what creates chazaka, twice or 3 times. But however we create this chazaka, right? I think we paskin 2 brothers. I think though there is a machloket about it. Then you don't have to do a brit milah. So lamanda amar v'atat briti tishmor ika. Again, that person's commanded, so they're part of the brit, so obviously they could do it. Lamanda amar himol yimol leika. But if you say only one who is circumcised can circumcise someone else, so this person's not circumcised, even though they're permitted not to circumcise, but they're not circumcised. But again, they're going to reject this based on another part of that Mishnah that we just talked about. Lamanda amar himol yimol leika v'hatnan. Right, you're going to say they can't do it. They're not considered mal. But look at the Mishnah. The Mishnah says, Konam she'ani nehenem mimulim. Now we're quoting a different part of the Mishnah. If you say, I will not benefit from circumcised people, asur ba'arlei Yisrael, umutal b'mulei umot ha'olam. You're forbidden even for uncircumcised Jews. Because really when you said mulim, you just meant Jews. And when you said mulim, you meant to exclude, even though you said circumcised people, I'm not going to benefit from, you actually can benefit from non-Jewish circumcised people, because that's not what you meant. So therefore, even though they're not circumcised, they're considered circumcised. So that doesn't help you. So what's the nafkamina, the one we've been waiting for? A woman. Whether or not a woman can do a brit milah, and this is really true, is based on this machloket. Okay, this is going to be the case. Can a woman do a brit milah or not? It really depends where you learn it from. Lemanda amaratai briti tishmor leika. If you say it's part of the brit, well, they're not part of the brit. Okay, women are part of the brit in general, but not the brit of brit milah. They weren't commanded to do brit milah, and therefore they can't do it. Dishallah bat milahi, because she can't do a brit milah. Ulamanda amar himol yimol ika. Why? If you say himol yimol, then she is part of it. Why? Diisha kemanda mihila damya. Because she is considered circumcised. Now, how could you say a woman's considered circumcised? But it's exactly what we said before. When you say circumcised, you mean Jewish people. That's what you mean. It's just a term for Jewish people. So if you do this drasha, whoever is circumcised can do it, you mean whoever is Jewish can do it, and that would include a woman as well. So now they say, wait a minute. Wait a minute. How could anyone say a woman can't do a brit milah? Vatikach Tzipora Tzol. Remember the famous story? Tzipora got up and gave a brit milah while they were on the path. You know, they were traveling, and Moshe didn't do a brit milah to his sons, and Tzipora got up and did it. Karebe vatakach. Oh no, she didn't really do it herself. Read the pasuk, not vatikach, she took it, the stone to cut the foreskin. No, she had someone else do it. If you do vatakach, it's causative. She had someone else do it. Vakti vatichrot, but then it says, and she cut it. So karebe vatachlet. Read it as she had someone else do it. Da'arma le'ina shachrina va'avid. She asked someone else to do it, and they did it. And she made sure it happened, but it's not like she actually did it. V'ibait aim. Alternatively, you could say, Ati yu va'at chala va'ata Moshe va'agmara. She started it, and then Moshe finished it. Okay. Anyway, there's obviously 2 opinions here whether women can do it or not. Your Hebrew is good. I recommend listening to the Sugya Ketana, which Dr. Meirav Tubal Kahana did a whole issue on. Can women be mo'alot? Can women be sandakiyot? And a whole real, span of all the different opinions. I'll just tell you very briefly that if you look in the Shulchan Aruch, okay, you can open the Shulchan Aruch in Siman Resh Samach Dalid. Okay, that's 264 of Yoredea. And if you read the first siman there, it basically, the first seif, it says, Akol sherim lamul, everyone can do a brit milah, even Eved, Isha, Katan, and in Arel Yisrael that his brothers died, Machmat Milah. Okay? But if there's a Yisrael Gadol that knows how to do it, preferable. But then the Rama adds, Yeshamrim, the Isha lo tamul. And he quotes the Smak, and I go, Mordechai v'chein nohagim lahaderach harish. And he says, better to have a man, not to have a woman. But there is this machloka between the Mechaber and the Rama and the Shulchan Aruch. And then the Shulchan Aruch continues, Aval avei kochavim afilu hu mahul lo yimol klal v'imal ein tzarich lachzor v'lamol pam sheni. He says it's in between about the avei kochavim. No, he shouldn't do it. But if he did it, you don't have to do another brit milah. So anyway, which by the way would be more like katafat dam brit. The Rama adds, just like he does with the woman, ideally not. He says even if Novei Kochavim did it, you should still do what we call hatafat brit, which is, taking out a little bit of blood, l'shem brit mila. So you have this big machloket between the Sephardim and the Ashkenazim here, because the Mechaber is Sephardi, the Ramah is Ashkenazi. Anyway, interesting topic. Okay, I don't know if there's women here dying to be mohalot, but that's another story. Okay, but are they allowed or not? New Mishnah. Mitchapim mehem ripoy mamon, avalo ripoy nefashot. Now we're back to what can you do with an ovei kochavim? Can you have them heal you? Okay, we talked before about brit mila and a mumche. Now we're talking about, can you go to a doctor? Now, it's not clear. It says you can do ripoy mamon, which is monetary, and you can't do ripoy nefashot, life and death. I don't know. It's very unclear what this means. The Gemara is going to try to figure out what is ripoy mamon, what is ripoy nefashot. So we don't yet know. You can't go to haircuts because haircuts are dangerous. I don't know if you ever thought about this, haircuts being dangerous, but haircuts are dangerous. Someone has scissors in their hand. Okay, I actually, coincidentally, I heard a story from a hairdresser last week that she was attacked by a woman when she was doing her hair. Okay, there was a woman who wasn't, she was an elderly woman who wasn't exactly completely there. And she saw this woman with scissors going to cut her hair, and she got nervous, and she thought that she was going to do something to her, like exactly this. And because it is a little scary, we're not really scared. We don't think anyone's going to do anything while we're getting a haircut. But she got really into a panic, and she started biting her and hitting her, and it was a crazy story. And this just happened. So anyway, it was in light of this, you can understand why going to a hairdresser could theoretically be seen as dangerous. So Divrei Rabbi Meir. Again, the Chachamim say, no, as long as it's in public, it's okay, just not one-on-one. One-on-one, we could see maybe you should avoid it, but in public, you don't have anything to worry about. So now we want to understand this thing about the ripoy mamon and the ripoy nefashot, that Rabbi Meir doesn't permit ripoy nefashot, he does permit ripoy mamon. We're going to have some possibilities. My ripoy mamon, my ripoy nefashot, Elem, we're going to have three options, okay? Reject the first two, stick with the third. Elem, ripoy mamon b'sachar, ripoy nefashot b'china. Maybe ripoy mamon means for money. If you pay them, then you can go to a doctor, pay them, and they can heal you. Because the assumption is if they're getting paid, they're going to want their money. So they're not going to kill you because otherwise they won't get paid. Ripoy nefashot b'chinam. But if they're doing it for free, then, and as ripoy nefashot, now how do you get from nefashot, which usually means, capital, whatever, something with death. How would you get to that? Well, what it means is nafshe, in Aramaic anyway, means yourself, or nefesh is your soul, yourself. So what it means is, if he's doing the ripoy for himself, meaning out of goodness of his heart, then you can't do it, because then there's a chance, since it's for free, maybe they'll do something to you. Well, litne, if that was really the case, then litne mitor bimehem b'sachar v'lo b'chinam. They wouldn't have used this very unclear language. The Mishnah in general is pretty clear. So they would have said, you can do it for money, but if you're paying them, but not for free. So it's not that. Ela ripoy mamon would be davar she'en bo sakana, something where there's no life-threatening danger. That you can do. But ripoy nefashot is davar she'esh bo sakana. Now, mamon doesn't really fit here. Nefashot fits, because nefashot is you might die from it, right? If you're sick that you might die, well, then don't go to the Gentile doctor, the idol worshiper doctor, because the idol worshiper doctor might might kill you and think, oh, well, they could get away with it, because they'll say, oh yeah, they were dying anyway. But if it's not sakana, then you're not going to walk in there with some little injury and then walk out dead and it's going to look good. No way, no how. So maybe that's what it means. But that can't work, because Ha'amar Rav Yehuda, afilu rivde de kusilta lo metasina minayu. Because Rav Yehuda, and assuming this Mishnah goes with Rav Yehuda, which we'll see later, maybe there's another opinion, and maybe according to that opinion, you could read it this way. But according to Rav Yehuda, if you go to bloodlet, what do? They put a needle in you. And then you have a little wound from the needle. Now, that's not a very big wound. Even that's the rivde de kusilta. It's a wound from the needle that they put in you. Even that, you can't go to an idol worshiper, a doctor. So, basically, it can't be that. because that's not allowed. None of it's allowed. So that couldn't be ripui mamon, is chol she'en bo sakana. But like I said, at the very end of today's daf, we're going to go back and revisit that. Okay. But ela ripui mamon is behemto. Oh, your property, meaning your animals. You can go to a veterinarian who's an idol worshiper. Ripui nefashot is gufei. And nefashot, we mean yourself. Okay? Not humans. Yes, animals. And then that fits perfectly with what we quoted Rav Yehuda. You can't go to get cured even for something very small. People, no. Only animals. But now we're going to start to see things where you can. So he says, but if they recommend, take this medicine, don't take that medicine, it's permitted. They might say, I understand. Medicines could kill you also, right? They could give you the wrong medication, and unfortunately, you could die from that. So why are we not worried? Turning now to Amabed, Savar shiyuli mashilo. Kiechad de mashilo, mashilo ina shachrine. Says the idol worshiper will say to himself, the person asked me about medicines. Probably they're going to get a second opinion. And if they get a second opinion, ata ugavra lo ruei nafshe. I'm going to get a bad reputation, because if they go to someone else and they say, oh, don't take what that person told you, you're going to die from that. Well, then obviously it's going to be bad for their reputation. Again, going back to this whole issue of reputation. Amar Rava, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. V'amar la Amar Rav Chisda, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. So either Rava, it actually should be Rava, or Rav Chisda, and the name of Rabbi Yochanan. Safek chai, safek mate. Okay, we're going to have another case where you can actually go to an idol worshiper. Again, we started off very, very clear, no way, no how. But we move to situations where you can. So if it's advice about medicines, yes. If it's another case, we're going to see also yes. If you're sick with a disease that maybe you'll live, maybe you'll die, could go either way. Whether you get the cure, whether you don't get the cure, so you can't go to them, because it could be they might kill you. But vadai mitrapim mehem. You have nothing to lose if you're going to definitely die. What does it mean definitely die? Well, then why are you going to a doctor? No, it means definitely die if you don't go to a doctor. Okay, if you're sick with something, if you don't get cured at all, you're going to die. Then you can go to the idol worshiper, because you have nothing to lose. Worst case, they'll kill you a few minutes earlier, right? Who cares? Okay, so, well, we're going to see. Maybe they do. So we'll get back to that. But the assumption right now is, okay, you're going to die anyway. So what do you have to lose? Worst case, they'll kill you and you'll die a few hours earlier. So the Gemara says, but what do you mean? That's worth something. 5 hours of life, 3 hours of life, 3 days of life, whatever it might be. If they kill you earlier, that counts as something. We're not worried that, for that amount of time, okay? Better to get your life back. If you have a chance, you should do that. And we're not worried that maybe they'll kill you a little earlier. Also, it could be we're not worried that they're going to kill you, as if you're going to anyway die. Why would they actively kill you? Again, we're not assuming. We have to assume they're bad, but to what extent would they do that? So now they say, and how do we know that we're not worried about this chayesha? Dichtiv, we're going to quote a story from Sefer Melachim Bet, where we have these 4 lepers. And there's a famine, and there's nothing to eat, and they're going to die. And the only place where they figure out they could go, because there's a siege on the city by the Aramim, besieging the city. They're outside the city because they're lepers. So their only chance is to go into the Machane Aram. What's the problem? They might be killed by the people in Aram. So here's a perfect example. They were going to die anyway. And what they decide to do, they said, right? If we go into the city and the famine's there, we'll die there, and then they decide, we'll go to the camp even though it's dangerous, right? They might kill us. But wait, don't they have to worry that if the Aramim kill them, right, they might kill them and take away those few hours of life. So now what happened though? They went, now it turns out they got lucky. God made a miracle happen, and he made noise at night. There was this noise that sounded like horses, and all the Arameans ran away, and the camp was empty, and they went and they ate. But they were willing to endanger their lives, right, by maybe getting killed by the Arameans, just, right, to gain a few hours. And you see that you're allowed to do that. You can go, even though maybe they'll kill you. So they obviously weren't worried about that. And so you see here, right, you don't worry about that. So from here we see you can go to an idol worshiper to get healed if you're going to die anyway, because there's really nothing to lose. And the little that there is to lose, we're not worried about that. However, Meitivain, here we get to a very interesting story. Just getting us off on something else, which is also super interesting, which is Lo Yisa V'Yitein Adam Im Haminim. So it says in another source, don't enter into conversation with heretics, because there's a concern that they're going to, this by the way is a different concern, not that they're going to kill you, we're worried they're going to missionize you, and basically take you away from the religion. And you can't get healed from them even to gain a few hours of life, right? Even if, you're about to die, and it's, again, not to gain a few hours of life, but even if you might die anyway, and the concern is only they might kill you a little bit earlier, you don't have to worry about it. So, I'm sorry, you have to worry about it. You can't go to the heretics no matter what, which contradicts what we just said. So we're not worried about Chayeshan. Here we are worried about Chayeshan. So, right, we're worried they'll kill you a little bit earlier. And, in fact, we're going to see a Maaseh. Maaseh ben Dama ben achoto shel Rabbi Yishmael, so the nephew of Rabbi Yishmael. Shekisho nachash. He got bitten by a snake. Uba Yaakov ish Kfar Sachnia lerapoto. Yaakov from Kfar Sachnia came to kill him. You might remember him. He's the student of Jesus Hanotzri, okay, Yeshu Hanotzri. Which again, there's a whole debate, is it really Jesus, is it not? But it's clear this is some early Christian. And he comes and he's considered a heretic. And he wanted to heal him. V'lo hinicho Rabbi Yishmael. And Rabbi Yishmael would not allow it, under no circumstances. V'amar lo Rabbi Yishmael achi, and he said to him, my brother, really my uncle, but Rabbi Yishmael achi, hanach lo ve'rapei mimenu. Let him come heal me. And I'll bring you a pasuk to prove to you that it's permitted. But he didn't finish what he wanted to say. He didn't get to say on what basis in the Torah could I prove this, and he died. V'kara alav Rabbi Yishmael. Rabbi Yishmael said about him when he died, you might sound familiar this line, Ashrecha ben Dama, remember, there were a bunch of great rabbis, prominent rabbis that died, and Yatzda Nishmato b'tahara, and they say, right, they died as they were saying holy words, or in this case, really doing something holy. What was he doing? He didn't go to the doctor because Rabbi Yishmael said no. And what was his greatness was, even though he was trying to prove that he wouldn't do it unless the rabbis permitted, and that's what he says, V'lo avarta al divrei chaverecha shayu omrim. So, okay, we'll get back to the snake. But he says, you didn't go against what the rabbis said because the rabbis don't permit going to these heretics to get cured. And anyone who parades Geder, who goes against what the rabbis say, should be bitten by a snake. Now, it's a little bit ironic because in the end, he died of a snake bite. The Gemara is going to get back to this. He's saying, you should have been bitten by a snake had you gone against, and you didn't, and therefore, good you died like this, which is strange because he died from a snake bite. We'll get back to that. Any case, what's the problem? The problem here is that it's very clear that you can't go to them even if you're going to die. Obviously, he was about to die because he did die. And you can't go to an idol worshiper even if you're about to die, because what's the harm? Worst case, they'll kill you a few hours earlier. But here they wouldn't allow it. Why not? To which they answer, which you probably should have come up with before, Shani minut demashka. The whole issue of minut is totally different. The issue with the Ovei Kochavim, we said, is we're worried they're going to kill you. The heretics they weren't people who were going to kill the Jews. The problem with minut is mashka. They're going to pull you to become a min. And I guess he didn't want this Ben Dama to become a min at the end of his life. He figured, even if, or maybe he'll save him, but he'll convince him to become a min, and that's worse. Right? They viewed heretics, these early Christians, as the biggest threat to them. Right? Besides that, we're talking about these idol worshippers, the big threat. But the heretics were worse because they were pulling them away to this other religion. And they were able to, because it wasn't as foreign to them, the whole thing of Christianity, they were able to pull them more into Christianity. And that was the problem, and that's why he wouldn't allow it at all. Okay, but you can't compare that to Ovdei Kochavim. It's a different issue. And you see it's a different issue because never said you can't you can't enter into conversation with an idol worshiper. We're not as worried. You have to remember also in that time, idol worship, there wasn't such a desire for idol worship anymore. Okay. Amar Mar. Now we want to understand this better. And we're going to understand, right? And yes, we also saw in yesterday's, thanks for reminding me, Becky, we saw in yesterday's sugya that the minim were viewed as worse than the idol worshippers because you can even put them into a pit. Amar, now we have to go back. So the first question is, he also got bitten by a snake. So what do you mean? It was great because otherwise you would have gotten bitten by a snake. He got bitten by a snake and he died from a snake bite. To which they answer, no, because what he was saying is that Yishachenu Nachash of the rabbis, if you go against what the rabbis say, Chivya de Rabbanan de Leitle Asute Klal. There is no cure for the Chivya de Rabbanan. This, at least, he had a snake bite that couldn't be cured. The problem was he didn't have a doctor that could cure him. But theoretically, he didn't have as worse a snake bite as the snake bite he would have gotten had he gone against the rabbis. That is a snake bite that there is no cure for. Okay. Leaving that. My Havile the Maimer. Now we want to know what. Aren't you curious? What did Ben Dama want to say as to why he could get saved by this heretic? To which they say, "V'chai behem v'lo she'yamu." Now we get to a very famous sugya. You're supposed to live by the mitzvot and not die by them. Rabbi Ishmael. So why didn't Rabbi Ishmael agree with this? Well, Rabbi Ishmael, hanimini b'tzina, abba v'perhetz yalo. Rabbi Meir says that's only if you're alone. If you're in public, you can't do it because we're going to see it's a chilul Hashem. Ditan. And here we're going to see Rabbi Yishmael's opinion. Now, if we didn't read this inside, what would you say? This goes back to the sugya in Sanhedrin, yareg va'al yavor, right? Are you supposed to live by the mitzvot or die for a mitzvah? And we learned there the big famous three. Everybody knows this. Avodah Zarah, Giloi Ariyot, Shvichut Damim. Those are the three. No way, no how can you transgress, right? Forbidden sexual relations, idol worship, and murder. You can't commit them. Someone puts a gun to your head and says, kill, or I will kill you. You have to get killed. That is actually Rabbi Akiva's position. That is not Rabbi Ishmael's position. Okay, Gefet this week, which will go up hopefully later today in Hebrew. I'm not sure when the English will come in, but Hebrew will go up today with Rabbi Nichana Dreyfus, who's specifically on this machlok between Rabbi Ishmael and Rabbi Akiva, which we're going to see right now. Rabbi Ishmael's opinion, they don't even quote Rabbi Akiva, which is the much more famous one, about the famous three that no matter what, you can't do them. Rabbi Ishmael doesn't think that. Okay? Rabbi Ishmael said, now in the Sugya and Sanhedrin, they distinguish. All other mitzvot, you can transgress them and not get killed because v'chai b'hem. However, not in public. But this is going to say, even Avodah Zarah, because what we're going to see is this is part of Avodah Zarah. This heretic, even though we distinguish idol worshiper and heretic, but they're putting them in the category of worshiping idols. And going to him is like worshiping idols. And therefore they say like this. Rabbi Ishmael said, that's only b'tzina. But for Hestia, you couldn't have this doctrine. Why was it for Hestia? Either it was done in public, or likely, if he had gotten healed, everyone would hear about it. And they'd say, oh, what doctor? And it would become publicized. And then they would see that he went to this heretic doctor, and that's viewed under the category of Avodah Zarah. So now Rabbi Yishmael says the following, and how do we know this? Because you're going to see what he says right now. Titania, Haya Rabbi Yishmael Omer, Minayin she'im omrim lo la'adam avod avodah zarah va'al te'arei. If they say to you, worship Avodah Zarah, and we won't kill you, but otherwise we're going to kill you, she'yavod va'al yeharei. This is fascinating. He has a totally different approach. He says, you should basically do Avodah Zarah and don't get killed. How do we know this? By the way, we're going to see this also in Nun Dalet. It's going to come up again, this opinion of Rabbi Ishmael. You might have thought even in public. It says, don't desecrate my name. And then it says at the end of that pasuk, Israel means in public. You have to sanctify God's name in public, so you can't worship idols in public. That's forbidden. But in private, and also other mitzvot as well. Okay, so in Gefet, she makes this interesting distinction between these two approaches and how they view worshiping of God. Okay, we're going to finish now with, so again, what did we do in this section? We had Rabba or Rav Chisda said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan that if you're anyway going to die, unless you get this cure, you can go to a Gentile, an idol-worshipping doctor, but not to a heretic. That's what we resolved in the end. Heretic, no. Idol-worshipper, yes. Then we get to, and then we just have what, why Ben Dama thought he could go, what he was going to prove, and what Rabbi Yishmael said against that. Amar Rabba Bar Bachana Mar Rabbi Yochanan, Kol makash mechalalin alei Shabbat, ein mitrapim mehem. Okay, we're going to stop here for today, but this brings us back to the beginning of our sugya, because what he says is, the second option we had of mammon and nefashot, which is the distinction between ein bo sakana, yesh bo sakana. if you're not going to anyway die, it's not such a dangerous disease, then don't go to the Gentile, because it's possible this idol worshiper will kill you. I'm sorry. There you can go, because there's no chance the idol worshiper is going to kill you, because it would look bad. You went in not too unhealthy and you come out dead. That doesn't make it, or you don't come out at all. That doesn't make too much sense. But if you're really sick, which is defined here as something you could be mechalel Shabbat, what you could be mechalel Shabbat for, and what you can't, that's actually the topic of Daf Mishalahem this week. So then, ein mitrapim mehem. Okay, in that case, you can't go to them, because, again, they could kill you and claim, oh yeah, they just died while they were in my office. Okay, so that brings us back, and this seems to go against Rav Yehuda. Because Rav Yehuda, although there's a whole machlokes about how exactly to understand this opinion, how it works in with Rav Yehuda, but it looks like it goes against Rav Yehuda, and it's a different approach, because Rav Yehuda said, for nothing can you go to them. Okay, so from there we end our sugya for today. And one second, I just want to check one thing. I forgot to, okay, that's nice. Okay. So we started with this whole thing about the Cuti and the Akum, who said what opinion. So we figured out exactly who lined up with who based on all the other sugyot. Talked about the issues with Cuti, the issues with the Akum, the lishma, not lishma. Okay. From there we got to who can, why can't an Ovei Kochavim do it? We had two different psukim. What are the nafkaminas? In the end, we said the one nafkamina really is just the women. And can a woman be a moheled or not? From there we got to what is permitted and what is not permitted by an idol worshiper, and from there we got to a heretic as well, really because we brought it as a contradictory source, but then resolved, oh, there's two different things going on here. So what we started with, an idol worshiper can't be curing you for any reason. We did see that there were ways that an idol worshiper could suggest medicines to you, could also, if you're about to die anyway, then you could go to them because really have nothing to lose, but you wouldn't do that with a heretic. Okay, and then we had this last opinion that perhaps it also, if it's something, if you're not really sick, there's no danger, then perhaps you could go as well, according to Rabbi Yochanan, not according to Rabbi Yehuda, but yes, according to Rabbi Yochanan, because anyway, there's no chance they're going to kill you, and therefore, as soon as we neutralize that, it's not an issue. And just to stress again, the issue with the heretic is more that they're going to sway you to go to their religion, as opposed to the idol worshiper, we're worried about them killing you. And with that, we'll finish for today. Wishing everyone a good day and hoping for B'Sorah Tovot.